That's right, it's time for another doll on a price limit. Budget Custom. This time it's the eBay edition. And wow, wait till you see all the things I got for under $40. It is legitimately crazy. I'm gonna try a new format. The prices will pop up on screen as I use new items because there are just so many things. So we'll jump straight in here with the doll. This time, Apple White is our candidate for customizing because this particular doll has some glue seepage in her hair. And I'm planning to replace the hair for this doll anyway, so match made in heaven. First, I cut off the majority of her hair with these little hair cutting scissors before I used one of these individual one-time use 100% pure acetone cloths to remove her face. When I opened them, I was super surprised. They have this really sweet, almost fruity smell instead of the normal gross acetone smell. I didn't wrap her in plastic when I dunked her in boiling water and softened her vinyl and took her head off. I've gotten comments about this step, the boiling water step, being unnecessary, so later when I put her head back on, I do it without boiling or softening the vinyl at all, and well, I'll let you see what happens. Anyway, moving on, after I got her head off, I pulled out the hair stubble that was left using these 7-inch straight tweezers. And this is the hair we are going to reroot with. It is a huge braid of Kanekalon braiding hair that can probably do $2 worth of rerooting. After cutting it in half and using what I needed, I had about a third of the pack left when I was done. And if I cut that leftover part in half, I am quite certain I could do another reroot. Just instead of ankle-length hair, it would be mid-back length or so. Sorry, rambling. Lots of hair. For the reroot, I purchased this little hand drill, which came with interchangeable bits, as well as this pack of sewing needles and these metal nippers. I cut the eye of a needle at a diagonal with the nippers, which definitely took some muscles, but was doable. And then loaded the sharp end of the needle into the hand drill and tightened the chuck until it was secure. And that's my rerooting tool done. It's not neat or pretty, but it's serviceable, which means we get to start the tedious process of adding a small amount of hair to the cut needle eye, like so, and stabbing it into the soft vinyl. Usually where the old plugs were, but not always, sometimes in between. The weirdly bent ends of the kind of sloppy cut at the end of the needle made the hair slip a lot, and also made it so it was hard to penetrate the vinyl. But I managed to get through, though it did take a lot longer than normal. And here I'm just showing the part, which I plugged heavily. You'll see later it doesn't much matter. Anyway, once the reroot is done, we run into our first dilemma, though I wasn't aware at the time. This is T8000 glue. I did test it on the vinyl just to be sure it wasn't going to melt it or anything. Sometimes solvent glues can react weirdly with vinyl or plastics, but we're good there. However, when I tried to use the fine tip, which I had planned on using for something else as well, I realized it was dry. Air had somehow gotten in the tip, and so I was unable to squeeze the glue out in a thin stream. However, I could feel that the glue was still malleable inside the tube, so I was hoping that that meant it wasn't rubbery glue, that it was still at least a little usable, it was still, liquid. So I cut the tube in half with the scissors, and to my intense surprise, it in fact was still usable. I took the tweezers I had and dug out some glue and blobbed it in through the neck hole to coat the plugs inside the head, making sure to squeeze the head around quite a bit so that I was sure that the glue was coating all the plugs. However, this glue is not really good for this application, and at the end of the video, when I am styling her hair, I will show you precisely why. Next, I took this pack of fabric I got. It's very similar to the little fabric pack I got when I did my Amazon budget custom, but with different patterns and in pink instead of black and white. I used one of the pieces of fabric along with the rubber bands that came in the package of Kanekalon hair to tie the newly rerooted hair back, and then used a few needles from the pack of needles to pin it around her face, just to keep her hair out of the way. And now it's time for the face up. These 4 watercolor pencils came as random colors. I had no idea which ones I was going to get. I ended up with this blue, an orange, a brown, and a purple. I'm also using this set of acrylic paint that came with a little wide flat brush, along with this finer point nail art brush, and the most expensive thing in this repaint. This is a new sealant I am trying. It's by Green Stuff World, and it is a water-based acrylic matte varnish. I've heard of this brand before. People use it when painting tabletop miniatures. So when I found it for a reasonable price on eBay, I was hoping it would be like the DuraClear matte varnish. I also have this purple micro glitter that I'm going to try and use somewhere. Possibly. We'll see. So I tried to use the watercolor pencils to rough out the face, and at first they worked okay. But then they stopped being able to draw on the vinyl for some reason. So I tried wetting them a little to make the pigment come out, and that worked alright. I ended up using the brown for the eyebrows since her hair is that sort of red-brown color, blue for the eyes, and purple for the lips. After that, I went in with the acrylic paint to darken things in. And once everything was dry, I went in with the large flat brush from the acrylic paint set and painted on 2 very thin coats of the Green Stuff World matte sealant all over the face. Spoiler alert, do not do this. Don't use this sealant. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know what I'm talking about, but I'll show you why later in this video. Just for now, don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Anyway, after that, I went in with white acrylic to really brighten up the eye whites, and I really, really wanted her to have freckles. But I was really feeling the pink, so I ended up doing like sakura blossoms and petals along with freckles in pink. I don't know, I thought it was really cute when I started, so I just kept going with it. And lastly, I added the purple micro glitter on her lips. Okay, now, on to the clothes and accessories. This is all the stuff I have to make clothes and accessories. I was able to get a lot of stuff to play with for the money this time. We'll start with the basic dress. I wanted a cute, puffy cupcake skirt Lolita dress, which means I need to make a petticoat. I bought this white jersey knit tank top and 3 different kinds of trims. A thick and thin version of this lace, as well as an elastic lattice sort of looking lace. I eyeballed how long I wanted the base of the petticoat to be and used the silver scissors to cut out a small rectangle of white fabric, making sure I kept as many pre-made seams as possible to cut down on my hand sewing. Using this pink thread and the needles from earlier, I sewed the rectangle closed on the open side and added this thin 1mm elastic cord so that the waist of the skirt would stretch to go over the hips but would be tight enough to stay on under the dress. Then I turned the petticoat right side out and totally forgot to film the next part, but I just folded the widest lace in half, gathered it very heavily, and sewed it around the petticoat in a sort of spiral shape. I ended up with 2 full rows of the widest lace and then 1 row of the smaller lace, which I also folded in half and gathered. You'll see it in a minute. Onto the dress. These are the patterns in the pack of fabrics I bought. They are super bright colors for the most part, except for this one that's more like pastel with reddish pink flowers on it, so that's why I decided to use it. I laid out the doll on the fabric. Here you can see the petticoat with the layers of lace gathered on it. I decided about how long the skirt needed to be, added an allowance for hemming, and cut out a rectangle. Then, since this is cotton, I folded up the bottom twice and sewed across the hem to avoid fraying. It was here I decided I wanted to be able to see a little of the frilly lace at the bottom of the skirt, so I cut the top of the rectangle off to shorten it a little before I gathered the waist. I then cut a small rectangle that fits around the bust of the doll and hemmed the top as well as the side before attaching it to the skirt. Then, to make sure the dress can be slid over the doll's hips to get it on and off, I used the stretch trim, sewing 2 strips at the center back so that it can stretch over the hips, but then also fits the doll when it's on, which eliminates the need for fastenings. And that's the basic dress done. Now, I mixed up an orangey brown color out of the acrylic paint, sort of riffing off of her hair color a little bit, on top of the back piece from the little pack of needles, because it broke off and it's plastic, so easy to wash and rinse off and clean. That's what this little black round plastic piece is. I decided to paint these flatback cupcake cabochons I got because I didn't really like the color on them so much. It was way too bright. I decided to only use the ones with white frosting and painted all 6 bases brown. And then I added the green stuff matte varnish to the top of these as well, hoping to help the acrylic stay better since the resin the charms are made of is quite smooth and shiny. However, I noticed when I put it on that the acrylic paint was sort of lifting, or maybe dissolving is a better description. It was weird, it started breaking up. This was my first clue that something was terribly wrong. But I didn't think anything of it, I just added some more brown acrylic and then used the end of a needle to dot the centers on the flowers that are decorating these little cupcakes. I did not seal those with the matte varnish, and moved on. So, since my glue was pretty much not usable with any degree of finesse, I have another option for gluing one of these little cupcake cabochons onto the front of the dress. I got a hot glue gun. It was a struggle because I had to bid on several to get the cheapest one I possibly could, because I found colored hot glue sticks. I bought white ones because I wanted it to look like icing or frosting or, whatever, but I knew the dress was going to be pink, so it had to be a secondary color. But I didn't want to do brown because I didn't think that would look good, even though, chocolate sauce. Just, there was a process to choosing what color icing I bought. So I used the hot glue and the pair of tweezers to place the cabochon in the front center of the dress, and then I started adding dripping icing drizzle in a detail around the waist. While the hot glue was still hot, I also added these long, thin beads to look like sprinkles. Only the pink ones, though. They didn't hold very well, unfortunately, so I ended up adding some back with more hot glue later because I'm stubborn and I wanted sprinkles. I got 4 glue sticks in total from the eBay listing, and by the end of this doll, I only have about half a glue stick left in the hot glue gun, so yeah. Suffice to say, I really liked the effect this hot glue icing sauce idea ended up having. To the back, I added a bow made from white satin ribbon, which I also hot glued in place. I think I forgot to mention that when I made the petticoat, I added a crotch strap made from a piece of this white ribbon to keep it in place since it was always trying to ride up instead of staying neatly at the waist. Then I decided to add little dots of white hot glue around the bottom of the skirt and at the neckline to sort of look like those edible pearls you put on desserts sometimes. Also, I may have just wanted to keep playing with this white hot glue. It's so cool! Eventually, I got over that and moved on to the shoes. I got this pair of textured purple shoes. I think they're supposed to be rows of chains or something like that, but I've turned them into waffle cones by painting them with the brown acrylic paint I mixed up for the cabochons. So these shoes got 2 coats of acrylic before I added a coat of Green Stuff World sealant, and this time I really noticed that it was almost eating into and dissolving the acrylic paint. And I let the paint dry for almost an hour between coats while I was working on other things and forgot about them, so it's not because the paint was wet or anything like that. You can see where it goes straight down to the original purple plastic as I'm applying it, and this is when I started to get really worried that this sealant isn't good over acrylic paint. Anyway, while that was drying, I took this piece of black plastic mesh and painted a section of it gray and did not seal it because at this point the sealant was a little suspect, so I was avoiding using more. Once it was dry, I cut out little 2-section areas to look like tiny belt buckles because these shoes are getting buckles. These are little pink cell phone charm straps. After I'm braiding one of them, so I had single strands of pink faux leather, I threaded the buckles onto them so they were ready to be added once I had put on... Yep, more hot glue icing, good guess. While the hot glue was still hot, I just pressed the buckles onto it and they stuck no problem. I stuck one side in and then kind of gently stretched it across the shoe for size, trimmed off the excess, and then stuck the other side in. And as you can see here, I can still get the shoe on and off without too much trouble, so that's good, just what I wanted. After some debate, I took some leftover pieces of cell phone straps and tied them into tiny bows to stick to the front of the shoes for another little embellishment. Then I trimmed them to length and that's the shoes done. And then I decided I wanted to add knee socks to this doll because she needed something on her legs. So I took off the shoes and put the leg on the stretchy white jersey fabric, traced the back carefully with one of the watercolor pencils, mirroring it over the middle edge to make a full sock that I can just sew the back seam of. I cut two of this shape so I had two socks, leaving a seam allowance, and I traced the original lines onto the second piece of fabric so that I could see where I was supposed to sew, before I folded each one in half and sewed up the back of each sock. Before I turned them right side out, I tried them on the doll's feet to make sure that they were going to fit, and then trimmed off as much of the excess fabric in the seam allowance as I could without cutting the stitches that held it together. Then I used the tweezers to turn them right side out and put them on. Now, I should have made the stockings before I customized the shoes. I fully admit that that is a great way to ruin a pair of customized shoes. So when I put the shoes back on over these, the white hot glue icing lifted and peeled off the acrylic paint. However, I want to say it peeled so badly because of that sealant that ate into the paint as well and weakened it. You'll see later why I think this is so strongly, but just know that I don't think it's entirely because I customized the shoes before I made the socks. Anyway, let's move on to these toothbrush travel cases. I know, just stay with me. I got this idea from Sky Magenta Craft. I'll leave a link to her video in the iCard. She makes all kinds of doll accessories, but her purse using the toothbrush case didn't have a strap, I'm pretty sure. That was sort of something out of my own design. I took the base idea and pretty much ran with it. I'm using the pink case, of course, and these are those braided faux leather cell phone charm straps that I got a set of that you saw earlier for the shoes. I got them in pink. That's clearly the palette for this doll if you hadn't guessed already. Anyway, return of the hand drill. I'm actually using it for its intended purpose, drilling some small holes in this toothbrush case. Word of warning, only the smallest drill bits that come with this hand drill actually fit in the drill chuck. The bigger ones for some reason don't fit. I have no idea why, but the small one worked fine for my purposes in this case, and the needle I inserted earlier for the homemade rooting tool was fine as well. Anyway, it took some work, but I was able to get some holes into it and then feed the metal loops from the cell phone charm strap through that to make a little messenger bag style purse. For decorations, I added one of the spare buckles I made for the shoes across the front, securing it with a little hot glue inside the bag through a side hole that I drilled and the opening for the toothbrush, so the purse will actually still open. That is my favorite part of this purse, by the way. It's still open, so you can technically put things inside of it. Once I did that, I covered one side of the top with hot glue icing and made sure to keep it away from the seam so it wouldn't interfere with the function of the purse. I went back later and added icing to the back side as well, as it seemed a little too plain. And this purse was perfectly cute and serviceable, but I wanted to be extra, so I used these little white seed beads I got, and after blobbing on some hot glue, I pressed the purse into a pile of them to make it kind of look like those cakes that you see at bakeries that have sprinkles or nuts or what have you pushed into the frosting. This I only did on the front side, And I made sure to stay away from that plastic hinge on the bottom. I have no idea why, it's just so entertaining to me that it's a doll purse that actually opens and closes. Off camera, I also added one of the 5 remaining cupcake cabochons to cover the big hole in the side where the toothbrush is supposed to go. I only put hot glue on one side of the purse, again, so that nothing interfered with the bag's function. It still opens and closes just fine. After the purse was done, it was on to her final accessory. Earlier, I considered making a ruffle to go around the bottom of the dress, so I had cut another rectangle of the white jersey tank top and gathered it. I ultimately decided against it, but I didn't want to waste the fabric, so I decided to turn it into a cape. However, at that point, my camera battery died, so I have diagrams for you to look at instead. At least for the sewing parts. So I traced her head onto the jersey fabric and made sure that it would fit in this hood so she could actually wear it, and then made it into this sort of shape, and cut it out from a double layer of fabric so that I would have 2. And then, as this red arrow indicates, I sewed down the back seam in this direction to attach the 2 pieces of fabric together. After that, I opened it up so it sat like this on the table, and made sure that the ruffle I made was gathered to the same length as the bottom so it would fit together like this. You can either sew the 2 pieces together all the way across that middle seam, or you can do what I did and sew about 1/3 of the way in on each side so that there is a gap in the center, so you can feed the hair through and the doll can wear the cape and still have long hair without any interference. For decorations, I added a lace ruffle along the bottom and then hot glue at the edge. I dipped as much of it as I could in the white beads I had left so it would match the purse, and then once I ran out of beads, I just added hot glue icing plain around the edge by itself. I used 3 of the remaining cupcake cabochons after that, sewed on a ribbon to each side so I could tie it closed, and then wrapped a piece of the white elastic trim around the edge of the hood so that it would look a little more finished. I didn't want to hem it because I hate hemming things, and it didn't need it because it was jersey, it just looked a little, I don't know, unfinished. After sewing that down, I added some little dots of white hot glue to make that pearl detail again like on the dress. I tried to keep the cape entirely white because I thought it would be like adding whipped cream to the top of a dessert if this doll was a dessert, which, okay, in my head, she sort of is supposed to be, so there's that. Okay, so, see this? This is her original face. This is the last time you are going to see her original face. Wanna know why? So I just put her head back on her body so I could style her hair, and this happened. Her lips did stay on, but I'm pretty sure that that's entirely because I put that layer of glitter on. Alright, I guess now we get to start over. Hooray! Yeah, if you follow me on Instagram, then this is the picture you saw I posted. All I did was gently squeeze her head to push it back onto her neck. It didn't even happen while I was pushing the head onto the neck. It happened when I squeezed her head to prepare to push it onto the neck. So needless to say, I was absolutely crushed. I took the rest of her face off with another of the 100% acetone swabs, except for her lips, which did stay on. And interestingly, it looks like the watercolor pencils stained the vinyl, because everywhere they were, it was like there was a base sketch already laid out for me. I didn't have to redraw the eyebrows, for example. I could still see where the shapes were, but yeah, so this is the other reason I always soften the head before I put it back on. There's always the chance the paint will crack, but this stuff literally just crumpled off after I put the slightest pressure on her face with my thumb. I really wish I had caught it on camera. I was cleaning up and I thought, oh, I'll just put the head back on the body, and I stopped filming because I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. Apparently I was wrong. I'm willing to bet in this case if I had put her head in boiling water to soften the vinyl, the face would have just dissolved off completely. Though I didn't want to test that theory and try it, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have mattered either way for this particular doll. So anyway, I took a break for a few days after the whole face thing happened before I finally sat down and painted another one. I did a lighter version this time with brown eyelashes instead of that harsh black. And this time the freckles were brown dots instead of flower petals. Then I added pink flowers with green leaves next to her eyes, so she was at least a little reminiscent of her other face. And that was all. Here are the two faces side by side. Let me know which one you like better. I'm still really mad over the first one, and editing this video now is the first time I've seen them side by side. I don't know what I think, honestly. They're pretty similar. There's things I like and dislike about both. Okay, I can't look at the old face anymore. Let's move on to the hair. Oh, another minor piece of collateral damage for not softening the head before putting it back on was a piece of the neck broke a little. Yeah, I made this choker out of the stretchy white trim and some hot glue, so it's not really noticeable, but yeah, if you can get the head on and off without heating the vinyl, that's fine, but that method is definitely not for me. So originally I tried a boil test on a leftover piece of this hair to see if I could boil wash it straight. This went fine, and I figured it would because the eBay listing had said that this hair was high temperature resistant. However, I also picked up this tiny travel size ceramic flat iron and I did a heat test with it and compared the results. And I really liked the flat iron version better. It seemed straighter and shinier and just all around nicer. So I decided to flat iron her hair. Now, you remember from the very beginning when I told you the T8000 glue wasn't great for securing hair plugs? Well, once I finished flat ironing it to my satisfaction, this is how much hair was pulled out, just from the pressure of flat ironing her hair taut, which you have to do if you want it to be straight. She still looks okay, but her hair is thinner than before, and I found clumps of glue on the ends of the parts that came out, so it wasn't that I didn't spread the glue around enough inside the head, it just didn't hold the hair for whatever reason. I trimmed up her hair with the scissors so it was to a length that I liked, added a few more little embellishments in the form of hearts made of that white hot glue that I love, as well as a garter and a few little wristlets, and that was it. This doll was finally done. Phew, this doll really got me to appreciate the term challenge by the end. I've decided to name her Suzette, after Crêpe Suzette. Sorry this video ended up being so long. You did get 2 face-ups in one video, so I guess there's that. She's extra sweet in pink and white with little hearts all over because she was supposed to be up by Valentine's Day, which was last week. But because of the whole face debacle, the video is about 10 days later than I wanted it to be. Sorry. I think she turned out very cute though, and this was the grand total I spent on all the supplies, shockingly. Granted, several of the things I purchased were bids that I won, which of course is luck of the draw, but I don't make this series so that you can go out and buy exactly the same things I use and make exactly the same things I make. Prices change, sometimes you get deals, etc., etc. I just want to show you that you can get supplies for not too expensive from different sources. Since I know that certain stores aren't available in other countries and certain online shops don't ship to every country, so no matter where you are or what your budget is, you can try customizing a doll if you want to. However, in this video I learned that you should definitely skip Green Stuff World's matte varnish for face-ups. It does say on the label you can use it in an airbrush, so maybe I will test that application later since I do own an airbrush and see if that's any better. But the instructions do also say you can brush it on to apply it, so I don't really have much hope. So far I think that Suzette is the most detailed under $40 doll that I have been able to do, because I was able to get most items for less from browsing around eBay, looking for deals, being diligent on bids. However, I have another one coming up that might beat it out if everything goes as planned. More on that later. My favorite part of this project was definitely that white hot glue. Though it doesn't grab onto the beads that look like sprinkles the same way I think puffy fabric paint would have, I had to reattach the beads a few times on the skirt, cape, and purse. So I'm not sure how everything will hold up in the long run. If you want an update video on how all these dolls have held up over time, let me know and I'll see what I can do. I decided to do one last bravery test after I took the photos. Just to be perfectly fair and make sure that it was indeed the sealant that had failed on the face, shoes, and capuchons rather than the cheap acrylic paint itself. I took my thumb and did exactly the same thing to the second face, squeezing the head and rubbing my thumb over the top just to see if the face at all loosened, because of course, After the second face up, I didn't seal it again with Green Stuff World's matte varnish. After the initial test when nothing moved, I was more aggressive here, but it didn't matter. The acrylic held fast, as it usually does. So it's safe to say that it wasn't the cheaper acrylic paint. It was definitely the varnish that had some type of reaction and caused the acrylic paint to dissolve and flake off. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Please let me know in the comments below if there are any online retailers I might be able to do another less than series on. I have 2 in the works right now, but I am looking for others since shipping usually takes a long time. Like this video if you like CZECH. Subscribe and ring the notification bell if you don't want to miss any future face-ups. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye!